Welcome to the Pan Am Podcast, brought to you by the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York. This podcast and our museum are dedicated to celebrating the legacy of the world's most iconic airline, Pan American World Airways. My name is Tom Betty, and I'm the host of this program. Thank you for joining us. The Pan Am Museum Foundation is a nonprofit organization. Our mission statement is to educate, celebrate, and inspire present and future generations by preserving historical and diverse personal stories of Pan American World Airways. Please visit our website for more information at thepanammuseum.org. Again, our website is thepanammuseum.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are using Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a review. It will help others discover this program. If you're not familiar with Pan Am, welcome. We are honored to have you here and for you to learn about what we're all about. If you already know of Pan Am, worked for or flown on the airline, or just love our history, it's good to be with you again. So with that, let's get this episode in the air, so to speak. Welcome aboard your Pan American Jet Clipper. You heard that right. This is a special TWA edition of the Pan Am Podcast. In this episode, we'll be joined by Pam Blasham, the director of the TWA Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Then we will be joined by Tyler Morris, who developed the former TWA Flight Center at JFK Airport in New York City into today's TWA Hotel. But first, here's a little history of Trans World Airlines. It is important to point out that Pan Am history is not complete without TWA, and TWA history is not complete without Pan Am. These two airlines were pioneers for most of the 20th century, and each achieved many firsts in aviation history. Not only did they lead the way in commercial aviation, but developed many of the systems, procedures, technology, and culture that are still evident today. The imprint that these two companies left on history cannot be ignored, and both companies share a direct link. And that common denominator is none other than Charles Lindbergh, who was instrumental in the early days of each airline and helped both with the development of air routes and aircraft development. Transcontinental and Western Air, also known as TWA, was founded in 1930 with the primary merger of Transcontinental Air Transport, also known as TAT, and Western Air Express, along with three smaller airlines. Western Air Express was incorporated in 1925 and was awarded government mail contracts from Salt Lake City, Utah to Los Angeles, California. TAT was founded in 1928 and enlisted the help of Lindbergh to develop a transcontinental route system for the company to bid on government mail contracts at the same time he was doing work for Pan Am. The company would later be renamed Trans World Airlines. It is important to point out that TWA always measured the founding of their airline from the beginning of Western Air Express in 1925, not 1930 when the two primary companies merged. This is evidenced by the 75th anniversary celebration in 2000 and marketing materials at each milestone year. Here's another example of how Pan Am and TWA were interconnected. Throughout World War II, both Pan Am and TWA served the Allied Armed Forces. Both airlines were also part of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's first presidential flight to the 10-day Casablanca Conference in 1943. Pan Am was responsible for transporting the president down to South America and across the Atlantic to Africa in a Boeing 314 flying boat called the Dixie Clipper. TWA was responsible for the president's transportation from British Gambia to Casablanca, Morocco in a DC-4. After the conference, TWA flew FDR back to British Gambia for his return transatlantic trip with Pan Am. The two airlines almost became one company on several occasions. In fact, over a 4-decade period, there were many times that Pan Am and TWA almost merged or acquired the other. We'll explore these proposed mergers and acquisitions of Pan American World Airways and Trans World Airlines in a future episode of this program. Both airlines were confronted with unspeakable tragedies that had a direct impact on their corporate futures, and eventually resulted in both ceasing operations. Both airlines also share something else in common. In 2021, Pan Am marked the 30th anniversary of the airline ceasing operations on December 4th, 1991, and went out of business. TWA marked the 20th anniversary in 2021 of the airline ceasing operations on December 1st, 2001, after being acquired by American Airlines. We encourage you to learn more about TWA by visiting the TWA Museum in Kansas City and staying at the TWA Hotel at JFK in New York. There are links to both websites in the episode description. Now on to our interview.
Welcome to TWA's Ambassador Theater. This portion of TWA's Ambassador Theater has been produced by Trans Global Films. And for now, have a great flight.
Pam Blasham joined Trans World Airlines in 1964 as a flight attendant and worked for the company for the next 37 years, flying all over the country and the world. In 2010, she became the director of the TWA Museum. Along with Pat Brinkman, Pam worked diligently to secure a new home for the museum in the original building that was built in 1931 to accommodate the newly formed TWA corporate headquarters in Kansas City. Their efforts were successful, and this building is now the home of the TWA Museum. For more information on the TWA Museum, please visit their website at twamuseum.com. Like the Pan Am Museum, they are a 501c3 nonprofit and would appreciate your support. Welcome to the Pan Am Podcast TWA edition, Pam.
Thank you.
So let's start with the TWA Museum there in Kansas City. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys got started?
Well, the museum opened in 1985 at the TWA Overhaul Base in Kansas City. And it was founded by the enthusiasm of shop mechanic Tom Perry when he purchased a box of items, and in it he found a Transcontinental and Western Air pin. The mechanics then started bringing him old items, built him a case, and that's when the museum was born.
And why Kansas City?
Because we were the hometown airline. The overhaul base was enormous. TWA was the largest employer in Kansas City back in the day. And again, it was kind of like Linda was saying in her interview with you, people said, we should have a museum. Yeah, why not? And I think the museum got started because this Tom Perry was so excited, and the other mechanics and all the, different departments at the overhaul base kind of followed suit. And before you knew it, he had all kinds of stuff. And they built him a big case, and we moved everything to the downtown airport. But prior to our moving it, the museum went from the overhaul base to the TWA Credit Union to Kansas City Administrative Center, and then ended up at Expo in Kansas City, Expo Center at KCI. When the woman who took care of it for 20 years said, would you do this? And I said, sure. Yeah, I love my TWA. And I miss TWA. So I said, yeah, let's go. And
Excellent.
that's how I became involved.
So tell us a little bit about your museum and some of your exhibits at the TWA Museum.
Well, we have two main galleries, and it shows pilots, mechanics, flight attendants, uniforms and information, a lot of photographs, a lot of models. And we have 4 very large floor models and items on display that were used during when the airplanes were regulated. And everything fare-wise was the same. And how do you get people to fly you as opposed to United, American, or Pan Am? And it's because of what we're going to give you. And 2 of our very interesting displays, one is the blue chip service. We were in direct competition with United and American from Chicago to New York. And so we'll say United left on the hour and American left on the half hour. And TWA said, nope, we're going to leave it a quarter till. And so their slogan was BTR, beat the rush. You didn't have to wait in line for your boarding pass, and you had all kinds of financial newspapers and magazines and nice gourmet deli sandwiches and a little beer keg. We're going to give you a nice ice cold glass of beer from these cute little kegs. However, when you think about it, the commissary guys very gently threw the keg into the galley, packed it in dry ice, and then we'd take off. And now we're in this pressurized cabin. And so, Thomas, would you like a beer? And you'd pull the tapper and it was all over the place. But we have a lot of items from that day. From that era.
It sounded like a good idea, right?
It was very clever, but the best of the best is our paper dresses. It was called A Taste of Europe in the United States. So this was to get people interested in flying TWA coast to coast. It was only on long haul flights, to have a taste of Europe while you're in the United States. And we had paper dresses. And one outfit was the Manhattan Penthouse. It was like black lounging pajamas or something. And then we had the French, I'm not going to tell you what I called it, this gold paper dress that was for French. And then we had the English wench and the Italian toga. And it was really clever because if it was French theme, you'd get all French food, French menus, French literature. But it didn't always work that way, because it would be, oh, it's French. You're wearing that silly looking gold dress. But all we have is Italian food and English newspapers. It only lasted about 6 months, but it was pretty clever.
It sounded like a good idea to begin with, too.
Yeah. Everything was a good idea at the time. And then in our second gallery, we have a Connie simulator, an 800 memorial room. And the Alpha project, I don't know if you know about it, but TWA restored an Alpha, and they found bits and pieces of it in an old hangar. And TWA people said, well, we'll restore it. And they kind of laughed at them. And they brought the whole to Kansas City, to the overhaul base, and they completely restored it. We have a piece of the original metal, and the finished product is beautiful, and now it's hanging in the Smithsonian. But a lot of information about the Alpha project, and we have a founder's room and a gift shop. Then we go out in the hangar, and we have what we call Ellie. It's a Lockheed Electra 12A Junior, and we have that and a link trainer, an education center, a scout room, ambassador club, library, conference room, and the cabin trainer.
Very impressive. So you have a replica of an ambassador's club?
We built it to the best of our ability. We have the actual twin globe glass, etched glass, that was in the Ambassador Club in St. Louis. A couple of years ago, I told these Czech airmen they would come in once a year for a get-together. And I said, hey, we're building an Ambassador Club. Well, they passed that on to this Czech captain, who was a really nice guy. And he called me and he said, I have the twin globe glass. I said, you do not. And he said, yeah. He came home from a flight and the glass was laying on the floor. And he asked his agent, who was not TWA, what are you doing with that? And they said, we're putting it in the dumpster. And he said, no, you're not. And he hired a company to come out and crate it. But he said, I don't live in St. Louis anymore. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So one of the Czech airmen took it upon himself to fly to Charlotte and rent a truck and bring it back to us. So that's really cool. And I believe it was just a luck of the draw that I mentioned it in the newsletter. And that's when this Captain Tom Irwin wrote and told me he had it. It's
wow.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's a great story. Great story.
The mission statement of the museum is to provide information to the public, emphasizing the story, history, and importance of the major role TWA played in pioneering commercial aviation. From the birth of airmail to the inception of passenger air travel to post-World War II era of global route expansion, TWA led the way for 75 years. That's our mission statement. And I can tell you why TWA is special because of all the firsts. TWA had the first air hostesses in 1935, the first with in-flight audio entertainment in 1940, fresh brewed coffee in 1957, and first to go all jet in 1967. It's a lot of firsts.
So what is different about TWA than some other airlines?
It's that family type of atmosphere. And I found it interesting that Pan Am had basically the same attitude. They were just family. We were just family. And it's really hard to explain. I asked Wayne, our blogger, I said, how do you explain it? And he said, I can't. I just really can't. And I think it stands out with the Pan Am people and the TWA people. They seem to have so much loyalty and so thankful that they had the opportunity to work for Pan Am, to work for TWA.
You know, you're absolutely right. In all of the Pan Am people that I'm fortunate enough to meet, there is this unmistakable and unbreakable bond between them. And it's really hard to explain. And I'm in awe of it. But you're right in the sense that not many airlines can have that kind of family bond that these two airlines, which were both giants in the airline industry of the 20th century. Sure. You really can't say that about some of the other airlines.
And I don't know why that is. Is it because we were kind of mid-sized, whereas some of the others are so humongous now that they don't have time to be family. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but it's a really nice feeling to say, I'm proud that I worked for TWA for 40 years. Oh, wait a minute, 38.
Well, who's counting?
Yeah, the last two were with somebody else.
Let's start there. Let's go into your story. So you joined the company in 1964. Why did you want to become a flight attendant?
I just thought, that sounds so cool. A neighbor down the street had a daughter that flew for Braniff, and I thought, wow, I wonder what she does. And I'd look up and I'd say, my goodness, there's little people in that big airplane. I just thought it sounded very exciting. I had kind of a weird childhood. And it was like, man, I can escape and get on an airplane and fly somewhere where I've never been. And I think that was the excitement of it. And training was difficult. It was 6 weeks of intensive training, and you better get all the questions right or you're out of there. It was intense. But it was joyful at the same time because you were meeting people from all over the country. And then all of a sudden you graduate, you're a flight attendant. Well, back then we were hostesses, and off you go into the wild blue yonder. Where am I going tomorrow? I don't know. And I do recall later in my career, someone in my family said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, to Istanbul." And they said, "Where's that?" I said, "Oh, it's far away." It turned out to be one of my very favorite layovers, Istanbul, Paris. It's just how many people get to go to Hawaii every week. And then the next day you're in Hong Kong. And then the next day you're in Bangkok. And then the next day you go backwards and go back home. And when you were traveling to Europe, you just get off the airplane, go through customs. There's your travel company is there to pick you up. They take you to the hotel. You have and it was free. I'm getting paid to do this. And somebody said, "Well, it's not very much fun when you're just there overnight." I said, "I'm there for 24 to 32 hours once a week. Why do I need to pay to go on vacation? It is vacation."
Do you have a favorite place that you liked to travel to?
I liked Honolulu and Istanbul and Paris, kind of in that order.
One of the things that comes up when I talk to Pan Am flight attendants, and Pan Am flight attendants are notorious for being global bargain hunters.
Yeah.
So was that the same at TWA?
Oh, yeah. The other day, two women came in and I said, "I guess you're a flight attendant." And she said, "How'd you know?" I said, "Because of that cartouche you have hanging around your neck." I mean, these gals that flew to Cairo all the time, they knew all the gold people and they were buying puzzle rings and they were buying cartouches and jewelry. And then in Honolulu, the airline people would go to these certain places and they'd be buying knockoffs, say Rolex watches and Louis Vuitton bags and stuff. But you better not be caught with them because the steamrollers come along and crush everything. So I wasn't too much into buying the fake stuff, but it really was. It was just amazing. Istanbul was fabulous.
I'd like to go back to what you said a bit ago about flight attendants being called hostesses. At Pan Am, I'm told that the service culture was based on a luxury ocean liner. And and I wanted to go back and ask you what was behind hostesses and what was TWA's culture.
TWA wanted us to be hostesses because there were no men except for the pursers, but they wanted us to be hostesses to treat the passengers like their guests in our home.
Can you tell us a little bit about the TWA in-flight service?
I thought it was superior to others, but of course I never had the opportunity to fly on Pan Am. But we offered a choice of entrees in first class and coach on long haul flights and lunches on short haul and snacks in between. But our Royal Ambassador service was awesome. It was served on Rosenthal china with crystal glassware. And I know that Pan Am did, the in-aisle service carving of the roast, and we did that as well. We served Chateau, and it was interesting listening to their type of service, which seemed to exactly parallel ours. And yes, we had very expensive Russian caviar and expensive champagne with all the, the iced vodka and stuff like that. It was really a beautiful service. And the food was delicious. It really was.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Royal Ambassador class?
The first class section of the airplane, just a lovely service, and everything was hand carried except for the roast, where you would carve the roast at the seat. But the other entrees, the lamb and the fish and what have you, they were set up on the plates in the galley, and then you take them out. Constantly serving, different wines and having, first of all, the cocktails and appetizers, and then the salads. The salads were served from the cart because we had different dressings and different toppings. And then the main course. And then after that, you had cordials, cheese plate, and then dessert, and then coffee. And then you're fat. You can't eat anymore. But it really was a lovely service.
Pam, because you told me before the interview what your favorite plane was, we're going to take a short break with a TWA commercial from the early 1970s just for you.
TWA 747. In 1970, by being the first to fly it across the country, we opened up a whole new era in big, wide cross-country travel. It was the most comfortable, most advanced plane in the air. Now, only a few years later, we have a plane that's even more comfortable, even more advanced. TWA's 1011. It's the culmination of every improvement and every comfort we've ever thought of. We've made part of first class a dining room with big, comfortable swivel seats. You can even make reservations as you would in a restaurant. In the big, spacious coach, we put in unique 2x2 seating, so you'll never be more than one seat from the aisle. But what's most important isn't that it's big and comfortable. It's that it's the most advanced plane ever built. In fact, it uses some of the same technology that landed men on the moon. If you liked our 747, you'll love our 1011. It's what an airplane should be. And that's what makes TWA what travel should be.
Welcome back to our interview with the director of the TWA Museum, Pam Blasham. Tell us why the L-1011 is your favorite aircraft.
Because it was just smooth. It was just so smooth. It had backups for its backups. And it was just, it was incredible. And we had this multiplex system on the airplane, and, a lot of it, was under the seats. And if somebody said, I don't have any music, I don't have any sound, you'd have to get on the floor and crawl around under the seats. Because, with passengers' bags being under the seat, a lot of times they'd unplug the thing. But aside from that little glitch, it was great. The passengers loved it. It was really smooth. It was very quiet. And then, the 7.4, that was equally as nice. The polar flight was a little long, but then we flew it to Honolulu from St. Louis. We flew St. Louis, Honolulu on the 7.4 and London. And then Paris and Frankfurt, we used 7.6s. They were okay. I like the big ones better. We would have some medium haul flights from Kansas City to LA on a 1011. And the seats were 1, 2 in first class, 1, 2, 4, and 5, 8, and 9. So seats 4 and 5 were in the center, and because it was 2 aisles, and the seats swiveled, and there was like a small coffee table like in between the 2 seats. So if you had people in consecutive rows and they knew each other, they could swivel their seats, and we would have to pop up that coffee table. And then we had to go in the closet and get this giant 8-foot tabletop and haul it over and set it on top of that small table, and then get this giant linen out. And we had, cocktails and appetizers. And then we had our beautiful Rosenthal china and crystal. And we would serve a 5-course meal on the way to LA. And they loved every minute of it. The passengers, they could communicate, or even sometimes, if it wasn't that long of a flight, they'd just swivel around and play cards, A lot
That's
of
neat.
passenger diversion on those airplanes.
So it was like, a dining room in a restaurant on the L-1011.
Correct. Yeah. And
That's really neat.
The 7.4 was nice, but you were either 2 or 2 or 2. There was none of that swishing around. I'd be amazed if we were still in business to see what kind of lie flat seats we would have. We didn't have all that, of course. The 1011 and the 7.4 were just awesome. They were just my favorite. The 1011 was just so ahead of its time. It was just so automatic, and automatic landings, and just everything on the airplane was awesome. It was just really special because we had, 3 galleys, and people felt good to get up and walk around. And the 7.4 was cool because of the upper deck. And originally, the 747, the upper deck was for first class passengers as a lounge. And then afterwards, they took the seats out. I mean, the bar stuff out. And then they put upper deck seats, and people used to fight over those. They wanted to sit in the upper deck. And it was just, I don't know, it was just really cool. I just loved the 1011. And when we did the Pope charters, one of them was a 7.6, and I do believe they did a 1011 at one time. But most of the times, I think it was 767. And the name of the airplane was Shepherd 1. And we flew the Pope several times.
It's interesting. So why was TWA the airline of choice for the Vatican?
I have no idea. Why didn't he fly Alitalia? But I don't know. They must have made it to his liking, maybe because he was going to the United States. So he decided to fly on a U.S. carrier.
A lot of people are very focused on flight attendant uniforms and pilot uniforms.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the TWA uniforms.
First of all, we have all of the former pilot uniforms, but the 50s uniform for the pilots, it was a gray. But what was really cool about it, their wings and their hat badges were Transcontinental and Western Air Express. And they're worth a lot of money. And it was an Indian head. And it was the same Indian head, by the way, that was the tail of Western Airlines back in the day. Beautiful, beautiful wings and hat badges. And then we have a large case for flight attendant uniforms. And I have a really funny story about that. But our designers for the uniform were Stan Herman, Oleg Cassini, Don Loper, which was what I graduated in, and then Pierre Balmain, another Dalton, Valentino, and another Dalton, and the last one was Ralph Lauren, which set an industry standard. You know, it gave you more of a regimented military look. When we got the Ralph Lauren uniforms, I mean, we were hot stuff. I'm here to tell you, we were hot stuff.
So your favorite aircraft was the L-1011, and what was your favorite uniform?
Ralph Lauren.
So the last one.
Yeah, it was really cool. The one before that, we had 3 different colors. We had kind of a yellowy gold, not quite red, and a royal blue. And you had skirt and jacket to match, but you had sweaters that matched too. 3 different colors of sweaters. And we had short sleeve, long sleeve, crew neck, V-neck. We had a blouse. And then we had stripedy pants. And nobody ever knew who you were. It was just like, oh, do you work here? Well, yeah, maybe I do. It's like, I mean, it was just bizarre. The uniforms were nice. They were really nice, but everybody looked different. You know, there was no uniformity. But I do want to tell you about one thing that I think is really cool. Have you ever heard of the Petty Girl?
I have not.
Okay. The Petty Girl was, well, first of all, George Petty did the nose art on the military airplanes back in the day. And he saw a TWA hostess in uniform, and he approached her and asked her to salute, which she did. And he enhanced her a little bit. And she became, well, first of all, she was always in front of either a DC-3, a Connie, or what was the other one? The Stratoliner. She was always standing in front of that saluting, and she became the poster girl for Armed Forces recruiting back in the day.
Interesting. I did not know that.
It was really cool.
Yeah, that is a great story. Are there any stories that are very memorable to you in the 38 years that you were flying for TWA?
I mean, we had a lot of celebrities because we were the airline to the stars. Thank you, Howard Hughes. My favorite person ever was William Holden. He was just such a nice, kind gentleman. And we had the entire Osmond family that took up the whole first class section on a 747. And we had the Jackson family. Kansas City was the first stop on their victory tour, and they were all there except for Michael. He took a private jet to go ahead of everyone. But one of my favorites, one of my favorite stories, besides having the baby in flight, was on a particular flight. We had just taken off from Tampa. And as we're on the climb, I see this lady flailing her arms around, and, we're on climb, and I pulled myself up there, and she and her, the flight was completely full, and it was a 727 stretch. So I went up, and she said, my husband, and I looked, and her husband was clearly having a heart attack. And I said, everybody get out. Well, first of all, wouldn't you know, they were sitting at the emergency exit row. I'm sorry, sir, you're not allowed to have a heart attack when you're in the emergency exit. Anyway, I got the wife to move and the man by the window to move, and now they're standing up. And so we communicated with the cockpit. We have this man on oxygen now laying across the 3 seats at the emergency exit row. The lady across the aisle and back a row had a 10-year-old. She had to hold her 10-year-old on her lap while the wife of the man having the heart attack sat down in the child's seat. The man who was standing up had to go sit on the flight attendant jump seat, another no. And the flight attendant went and sat in the cockpit, which, how many rules have we broken today? Anyway, we made an emergency landing. They took the man off. And because we made an overweight landing, then the airplane had to be inspected. Okay, so we were delayed, blah, blah, blah. Finally, we take off, and we're going to go to St. Louis and then on to Kansas City. And this was before all this security stuff. And so my flying partner and I were tidying up the airplane. And I looked up, and I saw this young man standing in the middle of the airplane. And I said to my flying partner, who is that? She said, I don't know. He wasn't on here before. So I went up and asked him if I could help him. He said, no, I came out to tell you thank you for saving my father's life. And I was so touched by that. And the guy lived in Chesterfield, Missouri, which is like, 45-minute drive to the airport. And he had to come and thank us.
Wow.
For saving his dad's life. That was just totally awesome.
It was, yeah.
That's one of my favorite stories.
So you mentioned a baby. So you delivered a baby on an aircraft?
Not me personally. We were on a 767, and we're headed to St. Louis from Frankfurt. And we're flying along, and I'm working on the right aisle, and my friend from Kansas City is working on the left aisle. And she made a couple of comments. She said, that pregnant lady and her husband? No, because I haven't been over on that side. But anyway, I said, yeah. And she said, well, I think they're having a big fight because they don't talk. And I went, okay, well, don't worry about it. So then during the movie, my flying partner and I went up to Ambassador to get something to eat. And my friend that was working on the left side came running up, and she said, that pregnant lady? Yeah. And she said, well, her water broke. And I said, well, give her another glass. She said, Pam, we're having a baby. And I said, I know nothing about birthing no babies. I told her, just get her another glass. So I went up to the cockpit and I said, where are we? And they said, nowhere. And I said, well, one of our flight attendants was a surgical nurse, and we paged for a doctor, but there was another nurse as a passenger. And they got the lady out of her seat, and she's laying on the filthy galley floor on the back of a 767. I mean, we did give her some blankets. And so the captain said, we're going to Montreal. Well, at the time we didn't fly to Montreal. So when we landed, they came in through the back door. I opened the back door, and this Air Canada agent said, we need to get her off. And I said, well, who's that man that just got on? And she said, oh, that is Dr. Fahon, and we're holding his flight for him. He's going to cut the cord. I said, okay. So then the agent said, I need her passport. And I went up to her husband, and I thought, isn't he nice? He's just sitting here while she's having a baby. And I said, where's her passport? Hello, he didn't speak English. He was not her husband. So we got her passport and got
No
her
wonder
on.
they weren't speaking to each other. It wasn't the husband.
It is like, you assume so much just because there's a man and a woman sitting side by side. But what was really funny about it is we would fly the same rotation, every week, or, you could trade or whatever. But so I was flying Frankfurt every week. So the next trip, we're going from St. Louis back to Frankfurt. And there was that guy. And I said, hey, remember when we thought you were the husband and we had the baby? And he just looked at me and put his head down, like, leave me alone. I was like, okay, all right, sorry about that.
So now the baby has dual citizenship because
I guess so. Somebody said Carl Icahn's going to charge her for that baby. An extra ticket. It's like, so anyway, that was fun. It was interesting. It was a great career.
Looking back, what makes you proud to be a TWA veteran?
I'm proud of the job I did. I'm proud of the people that I knew and worked with for all those years. And I'm just proud of the legacy of TWA, what TWA did with their first, and the first to discover this, and the first to have brewed coffee, and the first to be all jet. I mean, it was just awesome. And we were not always the biggest, and we were always in competition, but we were always, the smallest, I guess. And it was just, I don't know. I loved every minute of it. I really did.
What is it about TWA and Pan Am that still captures the imagination of the public? TWA is marking its 20th anniversary since the airline ceased operations. Right. And the same month, December of 2021, Pan Am is marking 30 years since that airline ceased operations.
Yeah.
But Pan Am and TWA is still very much has the public's attention. What is it about these two airlines that have endured all of these years?
I think they just set the standard, the innovations and stuff, and being, flying to Europe. And with us, flying to Europe and the United States, and then Pan Am later after the national thing. But I just think people thought of TWA and Pan Am as luxury. I mean, I did, but then I didn't know any better. I didn't fly on these other carriers. Mm-hmm. I was always, bound on TWA working, but I mean, even as a passenger. And I never had the pleasure of flying Pan Am, especially in first class. Going to Europe would have been lovely. And I often would look over, from our terminal to theirs at Kennedy and think, I wonder what that's like. I wonder what they do over there.
Both of these airlines are very much rooted in popular culture. You have young people in airports carrying around TWA bags and Pan Am bags. Uh-huh. What do you think about that?
I think it's
How
really
does that
cool.
make you feel?
It makes me proud. One day I was as a passenger on, Southwest, and I had on a TWA polo. And this man said, that's a very old shirt. And I said, I'm a very old person. He said, okay. And I really did used to look over, from our terminal at Kennedy to the Pan Am terminal. And I always, thought, I wonder what that's like.
Let's talk about the TWA Flight Center designed by Eero Saarinen in JFK. Now it's a hotel. The next guest on this program is Tyler Morris, one of the developers of that hotel. Let's talk, because I just love that place. I have been there twice, and every time I walk in there, it's breathtaking. But take us back to when it was TWA's terminal and you were working out of it.
It was really cool. First of all, the building itself, going into the front is just awesome. But there were two tunnels, two flight wings, and you would go, depending on where your gate was, you'd either go to the left or the right. And you'd go through these long tunnels that were carpeted in TWA chili pepper red. and you'd go out, and then the gates would be out there, and you'd board your flight. I don't know. It was glamorous, I guess. But in today's world, they still have those tunnels, but they have 2 hotel pods at the end of each, and you're kind of on an active runway. Is absolutely beautiful, as you well know. But there was just something special about prancing around that terminal because there was a point where we had the terminal adjacent to it, not on the Pan Am side, the other side, and it was British Airways terminal. And that then, because we had so many international flights, that was our domestic terminal. So we had 2 terminals at Kennedy. So we had that British Airways terminal, and that was, like I say, 99% domestic. And the Eero Saarinen building was just for international.
Let's talk about TWA aircraft liveries. One of my favorite designs is the last one for TWA with the globe. What are some of your favorites, and can you tell us a little bit about when they were introduced?
Well, are you talking about the very last one of the 747 that was red and blue? And is that the one you're talking about, or are you just talking about the red and white one?
No, I was talking about the 1996 change. It was kind of like a gold, white, a little bit of red.
Yeah. And the bottom was blue.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, that's going to be the featured airplane on our 2-story sign on the building. It'll be that 7-4 landing, and below it will be the Connie. So it'll be kind of like the early days and the last days. It's really a cool sign. I wish they'd hurry up and put it up. But my favorite was the very last one. A lot of people didn't like it because they were so tuned into the twin globe. And when we, all of our airplanes, were white with a red stripe with the twin globe on the tail. But then when they introduced the wide bodies, then they started making it a little different, and they just put TWA in block letters on the tail. People didn't like that either. They wanted the twin globe. So we all had our own opinions about it. And most people, from my era, they didn't like the last livery because it just wasn't right. Just like, I thought it was pretty awesome.
It's interesting you say that because we have the same debates with Pan Am people. There are some people that feel that the 1960s, 1970s with the blue stripe, all white, and it either says Pan American across the side, or when the 747 was introduced, it had a shortened black letters that said Pan Am. And then in the mid 80s, they refreshed the brand, and they had the giant billboard letters that said Pan Am.
I know. Just like somebody said, why did they make those so big? I don't know. Maybe they couldn't read. I don't know.
And we have the same debates with all of the Pan Am family because some people love the billboard letters, and some people are very traditionalist, and they said, well, why did you change this? Just, keep what we've been using all this time. Yeah. So it's interesting you say that because there's similarities. Yeah,
because we don't like change. We don't like change. One of the pictures that's going to be on our sign is this Connie. It's a 749 because it's got round windows. And back in the day, it would say Trans World Airline, but they added the S in 1950. I just thought that was so funny. Such a big deal about adding the S. So it became Trans World Airlines instead of airline.
Interesting. Well, the same thing with, Pan Am. Pan Am was Pan American Airways, and then they added Pan American World Airways. Yeah. And then Delta is still Delta Airlines, 3 separate words. Which, I always scratched my head with that one. But so many of our listeners are all over the world. They need to come to Kansas City to visit your museum. What else is there to do in Kansas City?
Oh, my goodness. Besides our museum, which we think is awesome, There's the Truman Library, and really cool, the World War I Museum. It's the only one in the United States. The Nelson Atkins Museum, the Miniature Toy Museum, fascinating. And the Negro League Baseball Museum, the Arabia Steamship, the Money Museum. There's a lot to see in Kansas City as far as museums go.
Excellent. So to our listeners, lots to do in Kansas City, but TWA is top of the list.
Yes, very much so. Come and visit us, please. We have a lot to offer, a lot to show. And then we'll tell you where to go eat barbecue.
Oh, that sounds great. Well,
Yeah.
To our listeners, I am planning a trip to Kansas City to go meet Pam and to visit the TWA Museum and also to see the new renovations at the Harry Truman Library.
That'd be great. I'll be looking forward to seeing you. Then you can teach me some skills on Zoom, okay?
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for what you do to preserve TWA history. And we can't thank you enough for coming on the Pan Am podcast.
And thank you for willing to share us with your listeners. Okay?
Anytime.
All right. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
No one can show you the faces of the world like TWA, the only U.S. airline with a frequent flight bonus program which can lead you to the Far East, Mexico, the Caribbean, South America, Europe, the Middle East, all over America, even all the way around the world, absolutely free. And since we also count the miles you fly on Piedmont, Eastern, Japan Airlines, and PSA, your free trip comes that much faster. TWA's frequent flight bonus program. It's enough to put a smile on anyone's face.
Tyler Morris is chairman and CEO of MCR, which comprises 3 discretionary funds and is the 4th largest hotel owner-operator in the United States. With over $4 billion of assets under management, MCR owns and operates 110 hotels, which is over 15,000 guest rooms, across 33 states, and has developed landmark properties such as the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport. Prior to founding MCR in 2006, Tyler was the president of Bliss, an upscale spa and beauty products company. He previously served as assistant to the chairman and CEO of Starwood Hotels and Resorts, and contributed to Starwood's overall corporate investment and development initiatives. Tyler earned his CPA while working at Ernst & Young. He also worked as an investment banker at Morgan Stanley and its financial sponsors, mergers, and acquisitions group. And one of Tyler's first jobs was naturally in aviation, as a baggage handler for Delta Airlines at LAX. For more information on the TWA Hotel, or to book your stay, or for dinner reservations, please visit their website at www.twahotel.com. Welcome to the TWA edition of the Pan Am podcast, Tyler.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom.
So tell us about the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport in New York City.
So, Tom, the TWA Hotel is a rebirthing of one of the greatest buildings ever built in America, the TWA Flight Center, which opened in 1962. Eero Saarinen was the architect of the project. Howard Hughes owned TWA at the time. An incredible building like this would never have been built without Howard Hughes' vision and direction, and frankly, his wallet. The building was never value engineered. It was never put through the ringer with the accountants. And that is how you get this building, which is really a piece of art more so than a functional building. And I think if you talk to any of the amazing TWA team members who were around in 62 when it opened, there were incredible frustrations with the functionality of the building. And that's why I describe it as a piece of art, a little more than a functional building. Nobody really knew where the jet age was going to take aviation in 1962, and the building was actually conceived in 1956. That's when Eero Saarinen first was engaged on the project and started to design the building. And in 1956, the jet age was not upon us. So that happened during construction. So that was, nobody knew what the future of aviation was going to be. And they built this incredible building that was really functionally obsolete the day that it opened.
Interesting. And it's interesting you say it's a piece of art. I love Eero Saarinen's designs, and I've read that people have called your building the cathedral to aviation because of its shape.
Yeah.
And there's no right angles in the whole place. I very much agree that it's a work of art. So tell us about how you decided to turn this into a modern day hotel.
Well, along your cathedral lines, I always love Eero Saarinen's tagline for the building throughout the design process. It was to express the excitement of travel. That was the basis for design for the entire building, to express the excitement of travel. And I think the building accomplished that in spades. The undercurrent is it looks like a bird in flight with the two wings and then the beak coming off of the front of the building. So, Tom, I used to be a baggage handler for Delta Airlines at LAX.
Yes, I read that.
In the early 90s. And I love aviation. And I'm a part-time av geek. And professionally, I'm a hotel developer and a real estate developer. So the opportunity to get involved with the TWA Flight Center and bring it back to life was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My wife calls this project our third child. And, the detail and the nuance and the tiny little aspects of this building are what make it incredibly joyous for me and for our customers and our patrons and our guests, anybody who enters this cathedral to aviation. So I was excited about it. I've been reading about it for years and years. I used to fly with my dad on TWA, sometimes in the L1011s and the old 7-4s when the upper deck was still a cocktail bar. And I was too young to be drinking cocktails at the time, but I remember landing at JFK and walking through this building as a child and remember how amazing it was. So, the opportunity to bring it back to life for many, many generations to come was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And I would be remiss not to mention that it is a huge historic preservation success story.
It is. We dealt with 22 government agencies on this project. We had 174 consulting firms work on the project, including 9 law firms. But the building is on the National Register of Historic Places, the State Register, and the New York City Landmarks Register, and is one of the most important buildings in America. It was actually called up or summoned by the Secretary of the Interior, along with the Golden Gate Bridge, Wrigley Park, Fenway Park, the Washington Monument, as one of the most important buildings in America. So that created another kind of layer of bureaucracy on the project, but well worth it in terms of doing things that were historically accurate in bringing this building back to life.
Let's talk about that. So what you could not restore, you replicated as close as possible to the original designs, correct?
Correct. Actually, step one was bringing the building back to the way it was in 1962. In the 70s and 80s, a lot of additions had been bolted on to the building. Obviously, the hold areas had been destroyed along the way, just leaving the swooping tubes. But a bunch of junk had found its way into the building. So step one was restoring Eero Saarinen's masterpiece to exactly as it was when it opened in 1962, with what they call the 2 flight wings and the 2 tubes, and then the bat wings that flank the frontage of the building.
Walk us through some of the other challenges that you had redeveloping this project.
Well, the building had been dark for 20 years. And when we first got there, it was filled with asbestos, filled with lead paint. The iconic soaring windows were made of non-tempered glass with no low E coating or no thermal characteristics at all. If you talk to a lot of the old TWA team members, they'll tell you how hot the building was and how cold it was. It was never properly air conditioned. Tom, you mentioned how the building has no right angles, which is accurate. It also has no visible supply and return air conditioning ducts. Now, that makes it more beautiful, but people like to be 72 degrees. And if the building is hotter or colder than that, it creates problems. So they monkeyed around for years with coatings on the glass, et cetera. So we added about 200 tons of chilling capacity to the building. But we had to do it in such a way that you couldn't see it. From a historic perspective, we couldn't just add new air handling units. So that was successfully accomplished. And the building, really does operate in a 21st century way now in terms of the temperature control. So that was one aspect, but we had to remove a lot of asbestos and the lead paint. Every single one of those windows, the iconic windows, there are 186 different panes of glass. Every single pane of glass is a different size than every other one.
Interesting.
And we had to replace all of those. Luckily, the fabricator that made the glass in 1962 is still alive, 92 years old, and he still had the forms for those. The gentleman did a terrific job of replacing those windows with tempered glass, but we were not able to put, for example, an integrated glass unit on those windows, which would be 2 panes of glass with some thermal characteristics, because the beautiful bow trusses that hold those windows up can only hold 1/4-inch single pane glass. And if you view the building from a distance, that glass has an incredibly green hue to it, which is a part of its historic fabric. So we had to match that green hue exactly, and that has to do with the iron content of the glass. So we had to make we had to do specially made glass to get that green hue of the glass from a distance exactly right in a variety of light conditions. So if you layer all of that on top of an active airport with 60 million passengers a year, all of the traffic that comes along with that, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and their requirements, and they sit on a land lease from the city of New York. So that created another complexity here in the project. We have a 700-page lease with the Port Authority and a 750-page springing lease with the city of New York, if and only if the Port Authority is not running the airport in 2051. So that created another set of challenges. So there's not just the physical challenges, but there's the legal and entitlement challenges of the project. And none of this really speaks to bringing back the magic of the building and infusing it with the TWA spirit, the up and away with TWA. And our intent was that when you walked into the building, you felt like you walked into 1962.
Totally.
And with all of the joy of travel.
Yeah, totally. Like, I've been to your hotel on a couple different occasions. First of all, I love it. And all of our listeners should come to New York and stay at the TWA Hotel. It is certainly a destination that you need to come and visit and see for yourself. But secondly, I tell everybody, the way I describe it is you're walking into a time machine and you're going back to 1962.
Yep. We have 32 different zones for music, and those are all extraordinarily coordinated. So you hear different songs when you're in different areas of the building, and there are millisecond delays because there's a lot of funky acoustics in the building. The shells are 66,000 square feet. It's an acre and a half of columnless space. It's the largest columnless volume in the world. The shells are held up with only 4 points of contact with the ground, and there's an underground system of grade beams that is pulling on those shells from under the building that pop them up. We actually met with Abator, who is the structural engineer of the building. He also was 91 years old. We met with him in 2015, I think. He has since passed away, but he still remembered the vector forces that hold up that shell and was rattling off all of the different calculations that they had to do to meet Eero Saarinen's exacting needs to the building. But because of those rounded shells, it creates funny acoustics. The music travels at different speeds as it runs over and above those shells. And so you render the sound differently depending on where you are in the building. So just adding audio to the building was an incredible engineering challenge.
That's really cool.
And then there's the lighting and doing the faux runway outside with its sequential flashers and directional graphics, and bringing in the vintage Constellation airplane. And we ordered 600 rotary dial phones on eBay, and so every guest room has its own rotary dial phone.
That's so cool.
And most people don't know this, but it's pretty interesting. The rotary dial phone was the best technology out there when the U.S. area code system was invented, and it was all of those things were invented by Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey, in another Eero Saarinen designed building at Bell Labs headquarters. But when that came out in the mid-'50s, the rotary dial phone, it replaced Klondike 5, Butterfield 8, Elliott 7, Chelsea 7, that kind of thing, the branch exchange system. And the shortest number to dial on a rotary dial phone is 212. The second shortest number to dial on a rotary dial phone is 213. Equally short to 213 is 312. So New York City is 212, is the old area code. Los Angeles is 213. Chicago is 312. So it went by order of size of city.
Interesting.
And the worst number to dial on the phone, on a rotary dial phone, is the 0. Right? It's all the way at the end because you have to dial it and then wait for the device to roll back around. And everybody likes to turn the screws at the government. Kind of a fun pastime for everybody. So they made DC 202. Right? New York City was New Jersey's place to go out, and they made it 212. So it's kind of a fun history of, when there was only 20 area codes in the entirety of the United States. And, the reason why the United States is country code number 1 is because we invented the system.
Interesting. Makes sense. We're going to take a quick break with a TWA commercial that was played during the 1985 Super Bowl.
TWA presents the difference between getting you where you're going and leading the way. Taking that extra step to make flying the best it can be. That's what makes TWA one tough act to follow.
Welcome back to our interview with Tyler Morris, developer of the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport in New York City, and who is currently leading the way with this landmark historic preservation success story. Tell us about the customer experience at the TWA Hotel.
So our objective is, as I said, that you feel like you walked into 1962 when travel was magical. And it was, people got dressed up to go traveling, and it was a real event. And it was not, as frequent as people travel today. So we want you to start your trip and start your vacation while you're at the airport. right? Airports have generally become a means to an end. I got to go through the airport to get to my destination, to go on vacation, to see my loved ones, etc. And it's not part of the fun. We're trying to make the hotel experience part of the fun, right? And we have our vintage tab cola displays and our special drinks there. We have a scavenger hunt. We created 12 different custom manholes all around the TWA site. There are 68 manholes on the campus, and one of the manholes is Eero Saarinen, and another one is Florence Knoll, and another one is Howard Hughes, and we even have TWA, who is the TWA mascot. In the ultimate irony, TWA's mascot was a dodo bird. So I don't know what to say about that, but he is an adorable, adorable bird, and we put him on one of our manholes. And if you find all 12 of the unique manholes, you get a free Shirley Temple at the bar. Something fun for the kids.
And it's fun for adults too. I mean, this hotel is so much fun for adults. So the kids love it, but also the adults love it too.
Yeah, we brought back, we have an extensive collection of TWA uniforms, both flight attendants and pilots. The reason that we've heard of a guy named Ralph Lipschitz is because of TWA. Most people now refer to him as Ralph Lauren. He had a small tie shop on Madison Avenue in New York City, and his friend Stan Herman gave him the TWA uniform contract, which gave him the balance sheet that he needed to expand his business. In the Schmata business, you never know, good season, bad season. It's very tough to finance against it, but you could finance against an airline contract because 10% of a lot is a lot, and allow him to grow his business. And, now he is Polo Ralph Lauren. And if you see the double-breasted flight attendant uniforms and pilot uniforms that Ralph created for TWA, they're right in fitting with Ralph's design ethos from the 80s. But we have Dalton and Balmain and Valentino did the TWA uniforms for a long time. We have the famous paper uniforms.
Yes, we heard about that earlier in the program.
Yeah, the foreign accents campaign. Those are wild. Mm-hmm. Terrible idea to make uniforms out of paper, particularly when everybody smokes and the uniforms are flammable, and not the greatest idea TWA ever had.
Pam Blancham told us about one of the other ideas where they had beer kegs, and that didn't last very long because pressurization.
Yep, that's right. So, and then we have our rooftop Infinity Edge pool, which is a very unique feature of the project, and it's heated to 95 degrees 365 days a year. So even in the wintertime, we just launched it last week, actually. And we have the runway chalet up on the roof, and we have fondue and hot toddies and all kinds of things to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. And then you can go swimming in the overly heated pool with the Infinity Edge. It could be snowing outside and you're watching planes take off and land from runway 4 left and 22 right, or on the bay runway, while drinking a hot toddy in a pool koozie up on the roof.
So much fun. It's so much fun. But we didn't talk about the food yet, and the food is fantastic. Tell us about the food.
Thank you. Our signature restaurant is our John George restaurant, which is called the Paris Cafe, which is the original name of the space in 1962. So we renovated the space to look just like it did in 62. John George has done a terrific job at bringing back a lot of the TWA menu items. They were in first class in the 60s and 70s. It was a real culinary experience in first class in those traveling days. And then we have a food hall down at the ground level with a variety of different food options, everything from paninis to Mr. Softy to Mexican food to Chinese food. We have Greek food coming soon and pizza coming soon. We have an Intelligentsia coffee outlet. We have the Sunken Lounge We have food and beverages on the Constellation airplane and a full food offering up on the roof deck. So while you're sipping your hot toddies, you can get a snack up there as well. And other kind of fun food and beverage options coming soon.
Interesting. And you do have space for conferences and weddings, correct?
We do. We have 45 different event spaces in a 50,000 square foot conference facility. We have 500 over 500 guest rooms in the project. And the event space can hold up to 1,600 people. It was a real point of pride to be able to host the Silver Wings conference about 6 months after we had opened the hotel. And I think we had over 1,000 Silver Wings former flight attendants for TWA at their annual gathering. And people just loved the building. And there were a lot of tears shed about the love of TWA. You know, the TWA former employees were really a family, more so than just employees. And the heart of their family was the TWA Flight Center, was this building. It was where all the action came, started, and ended on a lot of the European long-haul flights, some of the cross-country flights, and it was a wonderful place to be. But I think we've had about 80 weddings at TWA so far. And a lot of pilots and flight attendants, a lot of people met through the aviation industry and are getting married at TWA. We've done lots of bar mitzvahs and corporate events and JetBlue's big holiday party last year, pre-COVID. So it's a terrific space to have a 6 or 8 person meeting because it's at the airport. And, you know, all of the little benefits of meeting at an airport with the food and beverage options and all of the latest technology. And then we have space for giant events as well. So a lot of cocktail parties, a lot of holiday parties. So, the point is to have fun at TWA.
Yeah, and people certainly do. I took some of my friends there, and it's so much fun. That's what I say all the time. It's just a fun place to go. Can you tell us a little bit about the Sunken Lounge and the Solari arrival and departure board?
Sure. So the Sunken Lounge is the beating heart of the building. It is at Main and Main, and it's where you go to relax and watch the planes take off and land and have cocktails with friends. It is flanked on either side by the vintage Solari boards. The Solari boards we replicated. They actually cost, I think, $2 million. To replicate these Solari boards that were the same ones that were there in 1962. And we populated those flight boards. They're called a split flap board. It was made in Udine, Italy. The company is actually named Solari de Udine. And a wonderful group of Italian craftsmen that made those boards. So we populated those boards with all of the flights from 1962. So the vintage logos, the vintage carriers, and there's about a dozen Easter eggs on those flight boards. So we'll see if you can find them all. For example, there's a flight to Havana that is flight 59. So that is the year that Castro took over Cuba. And so that's one example of the little Easter eggs that are on the flight boards. But they're on both sides. And I was actually out there the day they were being in their final install. And the Italian gentleman wearing a hard hat with the crane and installing the board, we got to talking. And he told me that his grandpappy installed the flight board in 1962 in the original building.
Wow.
So it's really very much a family business. We visited the shop in Udine, Italy, and watched them manufacturing the Solari flight board. Mm-hmm. But these things are very hard to come by these days. Not exactly modern technology, but there's a magical sound when the flaps turn over, and it makes you just want to go traveling.
So what is it about these iconic airlines, TWA and Pan Am, that still captures the public's imagination for adventure and nostalgia?
Well, I think TWA and Pan Am, they were the zeitgeist in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Other airlines came and went, but almost all of the innovations across the entire industry were either Pan Am or TWA. They were driven by two larger-than-life characters, Juan Trippe and Howard Hughes. And they were pushing the envelope. And they recognized and acknowledged that innovation is important in the business, and it is how you compete. So autopilot was actually invented on a TWA aircraft, the Lockheed 1649A, the Super Connie, that is parked in our front yard. It was invented by Kelly Johnson, the very famous and fabled aircraft engineer. And the first in-flight movie was on TWA. Pan Am had a lot of innovations back in the day as well, but these were two companies that were competing head-to-head and took it very personally to provide a better customer experience. And they both had global networks. You could fly really anywhere in the world on these two carriers. TWA was always fond of saying that it was the only domestic and international carrier. Most people don't realize that Pan Am was really just an international carrier. It flew from the east, farther east, and from the west, farther west, and from Miami in the south, farther south. But TWA, you could fly from Kansas City to Rome. And in fact, I had a fun conversation with Cardinal Dolan here in New York. He used to be St. Louis based, so that obviously made him a TWA flyer. But he would fly from St. Louis to Rome, and he would stop over at the TWA Flight Center. This is in the late 80s, early 90s, on his flight to Rome, and he would sit in the Pope's room in the first class lounge in the Ambassadors Club. And the Pope's room was named that because the Pope always flew TWA. So it was Pope Paul VI and John Paul II, both exclusively flew TWA. And that was what these carriers were both doing in terms of innovating. They wanted to be the best at everything they did. And that kind of spirit caused them to be the Coke and Pepsi of the aviation business.
I want to ask you a personal question. So you led the way in restoring and saving this building. How does that make you feel that you were such an important part of preserving the legacy of this great airline?
Well, I take a lot of responsibility. And there's a lot of people who came and went through this building. I can't tell you how many folks I've met with over the years who got engaged in this building. And, now at the TWA Hotel who are getting married in this building. Or met for the first time in this building. And it's an incredibly important building to a lot of families across America. And it's a responsibility that I don't take lightly. And I really, frankly, feel honored to be a part of. The history of these two great carriers and their competition with one another and the impact that it had on thousands and thousands of lives is a big deal to America and to the world. And to be able to be a part of this, gives me a special feeling inside. And I hope that I'm doing right by the people that came before me in this building.
I'll tell you a quick story. So in late September, I was in the sunken lounge doing some Pan Am work on my laptop. Gentleman walked up to me and said, "Can you take some pictures? I'm going to propose to my girlfriend." And it was just like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah, right here.
Yeah. No, we periodically we will change the Solari board to say, "Hey Donna, will you marry me?"
Interesting.
And it happens probably a couple times a month. And it's just a testament to, there's lots of hotels out there. There's lots of buildings out there. but there aren't that many really special ones that people intertwine their life into.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining the Pan Am Podcast TWA edition. Anything else you'd like to tell our listeners?
Well, I just, as I say all the time, up and away with TWA.
And please come to JFK Airport and stay at the TWA Hotel. You will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for your time, Tyler.
Thanks, Tom. Great talking to you.
Enroll in our frequent flight bonus program. We'll count today's flight, plus give you a 3,000-mile bonus. Look for the form in your Ambassador magazine or ask your flight attendant.
Pan Am was a pioneer in air travel and still stands as one of the most iconic and innovative airlines in aviation history. That legacy lives on at the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York, where you can explore the rich history of the aircrafts and individuals at the heart of the company known as the world's most experienced airline. For more information about the Pan Am Museum, check out our website at www.thepanammuseum.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. As was once a tagline in one of our commercials, we would greatly appreciate your support to help the Pan Am Museum continue making the going great. You can also support the museum by shopping on our online store for all things Pan Am, accessories, apparel, jewelry, books, models, and posters. We want to hear from you. If you have a question for us or want to share your story, our email address is podcast@thepanammuseum.org. Yes, this is the Pan Am Podcast. However, since this is the TWA edition, we're going to close out this special episode with a TWA song from 1968 by The Fifth Dimension called Up, and Away. As flight crews once said to passengers departing for their destinations around the world, thank you for flying, Pan Am.
Wouldn't you like to fly up and away? Wouldn't you like to fly up and away?
If you'll take our hand, we'll chase your dream across the sky. For we can fly up and away. How beautiful to fly.
We'll pick a star in the twilight canopy and search the world for the sights you long to see.
Your heart is young, you're alive, so come with me.
TWA, up and away.